Good evening, students. This video is on the classical critic Aristotle, and the target audience for this video is my third BA English literature students. Let me start with Aristotle's important work, that is Poetics. Aristotle, as we all know, was a student of Plato, and Plato was the student of Socrates. Plato ran an academy called Academy. The title of the academy, the name of the academy itself is Academy. And at the age of 17, Aristotle enrolled in Plato's academy. And Aristotle himself ran an academy, and the name of it is Lyceum. And he has published around 200 works, out of which only 31 works are left behind. Let me start with Aristotle's view on poetry. According to Aristotle, poetry is mimetic. Poetry is an imitation of life. What you see in life gets represented in poetry. And there is a difference between Aristotle's view on poetry and Plato's view on poetry. This is one question which you could expect in interviews, where people will ask you to differentiate between Plato's view on art or Plato's view on poetry and Aristotle's view on art or poetry. So what does Plato talk about as a definition of poetry? According to Plato, poetry is twice removed from reality, whereas for Aristotle, poetry is representation of life. When Plato says poetry is twice removed from reality, when what happens in real life becomes once removed when it enters the mind of the poet or the artist, and from the mind of the artist it again gets removed, and then it becomes a painting or a poem. It gets transferred into a piece of art, into a poem or an art. So repeat. Say for example, if I am going to draw the image of a tree, the real tree gets removed from the real world. It enters my mind, that is the artist's mind or the poet's mind. And the tree which is there in reality is completely different from the tree which is inside the mind of the artist. And this tree gets once again removed from the artist's brain. There is some modification which is being done here, and then it gets transferred into a piece of painting. Alright, so therefore, according to Plato, art is twice removed from reality, whereas Aristotle says art or poetry is representation of life. So this is a basic difference between Plato's view and Aristotle's view. And Aristotle had a son who, just like Rudyard Kipling's son, died during war. You know this famous writer who said, "East is east, west is west, and never shall the twain meet." Rudyard Kipling. He lost his only son in the war. Rudyard Kipling lost his only son in the war, but he was for war. And as you know, he was born in Bombay. Rudyard Kipling was born in Bombay, and he worked as a constable. He later on, Rudyard Kipling's books were removed from the British Library because he had some extreme views on race. For example, when he said east is east, west is west, never shall the twain meet. Okay, just like Rudyard Kipling's son, Aristotle's son also died in war. And the name of Aristotle's son is Nicomachus, and Aristotle came up with a work called Nicomachus Ethics. And Dante, in Divine Comedy, comments or remarks Aristotle or terms Aristotle to be the master. Okay, moving on to Poetics by Aristotle. Poetics, as we all know, consists of 26 books, and the first, it consists of 26 chapters rather, and the first 4 chapters talk about poetry. The 14th chapter is on, tragedy. And what does Aristotle do in Poetics? He brings in a comparison between tragedy and epic, tragedy and comedy, and he concludes that tragedy is the best. Out of the 3, according to Aristotle, tragedy is the best. And now let me move on to Aristotle's definition of tragedy. What is the definition of tragedy according to Aristotle? Tragedy is an imitation of a serious action. Tragedy is mimetic. Again, he uses the word mimesis. Mimesis meaning imitation, copy. It is an imitation of reality. Tragedy is an imitation of reality. And what reality? Of an action which is very serious. So I repeat, tragedy is mimesis of a serious action, of an action considered to be serious. Later on, this concept is taken up by Crutch in his work Tragic Fallacy, where he comments on this view of Aristotle on tragedy. All right. So Tragic Fallacy, it's another important critical piece that you have to go and read. And according to Aristotle, tragedy is an imitation of a serious action. The next subheading could be the 6 components of a tragedy. What are the 6 components of a tragedy? From the most important to the least important. The most important component being plot. The second is character. The third is thought. The fourth is diction. The fifth is melody. And the 6th is spectacle. These are the 6 components of a tragedy: plot, character, thought, diction, melody, and spectacle. Plot, as you all know, is the story, and diction is a choice of word, is a lexis, the language used by the writer, that is called the language used by the writer, that is called lexis, the choice of words, diction. And spectacle is what you see on the stage. In Tamil, it is the kaatchi. What you see on the stage is the spectacle. And the most important is plot. And he says a plot should have a proper beginning, a middle, and an end. Though it starts in media res. Usually a plot starts in media res. And what is media res? Media res is in the middle. It is from the middle, not from the beginning. Though it begins in media res, all right. For example, the character could be, say, 40 years old. The story begins in the middle. Even though the story begins in the middle, what you see in Tamil cinema, right? The hero would be studying in college, or the hero would be working somewhere, and the story starts there. Though it starts from the middle, this story still will have a proper beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is what Thomas de Quincey calls it as sequentiousness. This concept of Aristotle's plot beginning in media res with proper beginning, middle, and end is called sequentiousness by Thomas de Quincey. Then, what does Aristotle talk about the hero in a tragedy? According to Aristotle, the hero in a tragedy should be a man of great importance, a great leader, a king, a queen, a princess, a prime minister, a woman or a man of national importance should be the hero or the protagonist, says Aristotle. Because only the fall of such a high profile character will create, say, great impact on the audience, according to Aristotle. Alright, say for example, we would have known what happened when the great Iron Lady of India, the former Prime Minister, or Indira Gandhi, when she was assassinated, we know what actually happened. All right, it created a great impact. It created great violence. So only the demise of great personality will create such an impact. That is why Aristotle says the protagonist in a tragedy should be a man or a woman of national importance. Okay, then we will look at some of say important terms in Aristotle's Poetics. The first one is Hamartia. So what is Hamartia? Hamartia is a tragic flaw. As I told you, the hero or the heroine, the protagonist, who is of great importance, will have a very small tragic flaw. The hero or the heroine, a great national leader, a great say warrior or a military general like in Othello, or a prince in Hamlet, or like say a king in King Lear, will have a very small tragic flaw. And because of this tragic flaw, this hero or the heroine will fall from a very high position. Alright? And this hero or the heroine, the protagonist, should neither be too good nor be too bad. What does Aristotle mean by this? When somebody is too good, he will not have a tragic flaw. As I told you, Hamartia is equal to tragic flaw. Hamartia means missing the mark. There is a very small flaw in the character, and because of this flaw, this character, this protagonist falls. When somebody is too perfect, he or she will not have a flaw, and therefore he or she will never fall. And when somebody is too bad, people will not have sympathy for that character, and therefore that character will become a villain, not a hero or a heroine. So the hero should be appropriate, the character should be appropriate. The character should neither be too good nor be too bad. Rather, the protagonist should have a tragic flaw and the character should be appropriate, says Aristotle. Then he talks about anagnorisis. Anagnorisis is nothing but the recognition of truth. At some point in the story, in the plot, the character gets to know a truth. A revelation happens. A recognition of truth happens. Say, for example, in Hamlet by Shakespeare, Prince Hamlet learns that his father, King Hamlet, was murdered by his own uncle. And how does he know? Through the ghost of his father. The ghost of Hamlet's father, that is Prince Hamlet's father, that is King Hamlet, tells Prince Hamlet that the king has been murdered by his own brother. That is Prince Hamlet's uncle, Claudius, murdered King Hamlet. And how does this murder happen? By pouring lead into the ears. By pouring poison into the ears. And this is told by the ghost of King Hamlet, and this is called anagnorisis. This is one example for anagnorisis. And anagnorisis, as I told you, is recognition of truth. Here Prince Hamlet recognizes the truth about his father's death. It is not death actually, it is rather murder. This recognition happens. This recognition or this anagnosis is very important for the construction of the further proceedings of the story. Okay, so plot, character, then we had this anagnosis, and the next important term is peripedia. Peripedia is nothing but a reversal of fortune. What is reversal of fortune? Reversal of fortune means either from rags to riches or from riches to rags. Either from bottom to top or from top to bottom. That is called reversal of fortune. You would have witnessed in many of old Tamil cinema where in one song, like in a movie like Surya Vamsam or Padayappa, in one song the hero becomes a crorepati. The hero's fortune changes. That happens in a comedy. That happens in a story where everything goes very smooth towards end. Where in a tragedy the reverse happens. A peripedia happens it's like from riches to rags. From the top suddenly the hero falls because of a tragic flaw. So peripedia is equal to reversal of fortune. And the next term is catastrophe. Catastrophe is disaster, and the disaster here is the death of the main character, the death of the central character. And the final term is catharsis. Catharsis is purification or purgation of emotions. The hero, when he falls, creates pity and fear in the mind of the audience. When such a thing happens for such a great person, what will happen to us? There is a fear. And the audience will again feel sympathetic, and they feel pity for the central character. So through pity and fear, the emotions of the audience are purified. Purgation or purification of emotions happen. So this is called catharsis. So that is it with this video on Aristotle. Thank you.
Capture.